The outlaw waited in the desert for justice, until a widow rode in with his child in her arms. The desert stretched endless and silent, a pale sea of dust and memory under the hard Nevada sun. Jed Coulter sat beside the gallows he'd built for himself, a weathered post rising from the sand like a monument to guilt. He'd ridden into this wasteland 3 days ago after turning himself in at Fort Clay, waiting for the marshal who never came. His canteen was half empty, his throat raw from the wind, his hands resting on his knees as if the weight of his sins alone held him down. The law called him an outlaw, but even the men he'd robbed knew he'd never taken more than he needed, until the night he'd pulled the trigger on a man who hadn't deserved dying. That mistake had cost him everything. He had buried the revolver deep beneath the sand at dawn, the act of a man trying to make peace with the ghosts that followed him. When he closed his eyes, he saw her, the widow of the man he'd killed, standing in the church doorway the day he fled town, her black veil trembling in the wind, her eyes burning through him without a word. That image had driven him back here, waiting for her forgiveness or a rope, whichever came first. The wind picked up, swirling grit across his boots. Far off, a shape shimmered through the heat, a rider moving slow, steady, cutting through the mirage like something pulled by purpose. Jed stood, shielding his eyes. The sun caught the glint of a silver buckle, the sway of a black dress. It wasn't the marshal, it wasn't a posse, it was her. The horse stopped 10 paces away, its flanks streaked with dust. The woman swung down, boots crunching against the dry ground, a small bundle wrapped tight in her arms. Her face was leaner than he remembered, the years having carved sorrow into beauty's place. "Mrs. Avery," he said, the words breaking like dry twigs in his mouth. She looked at him a long time before speaking. "You said you'd wait," she murmured. "I didn't believe you. I don't run anymore." "Good," she said. Then she shifted the bundle, revealing a sleeping infant tucked against her chest. "He's yours." Jed's breath caught. "Mine?" "You left more than a body that night," she said. "You left this." The wind howled between them, lifting her veil, revealing eyes that held no hate, only exhaustion. He stared at the child, the truth burning deeper than the desert sun. "Why bring him here?" he asked hoarsely. "Because justice don't always wear a badge," she said. "Sometimes it cries." She stepped closer, holding the baby out. "He deserves a father, even if the world thinks you don't." Jed's legs felt weak. The desert blurred. Somewhere beyond the horizon, thunder rolled. No storm, just the sound of something in him breaking free. Jed didn't reach for the child right away. His fingers twitched, his breath shallow, as though even touching the baby might damn it. The widow watched him with eyes that had seen too much to flinch. "You can hold him," she said softly. "He won't break." Jed swallowed hard. "You sure he's mine?" "I wish I wasn't," she said, not cruelly but plain, "but I know my own shame when it cries at night." Her honesty hit harder than any bullet he'd ever taken. He stepped closer, slow as a man walking toward judgment. The baby stirred, a small sound against the wind, and without thinking, Jed took him. The weight was small, too small, and yet heavier than the gun he'd buried. The child's eyes fluttered open, blue-gray like the sky before a storm, and for the first time since the killing, Jed felt his chest ache with something he didn't have a name for. "What did you call him?" he asked. "Elias," she said. "After his father." Jed winced. "You should have named him something better than that." "I named him after the man who deserved to live," she said. "Not the one who ran." He nodded slowly. "That's fair." The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was something raw, like a wound refusing to close. The baby made a small noise, and Jed swayed without meaning to, the movement clumsy but instinctive. The widow, Anna, watched, her expression unreadable. "I've been following you since spring," she said. "I heard you were waiting for the law out here. I figured if you were ready for punishment, you were ready for truth." "You came all this way for that?" "For him," she said, nodding toward the child. "He deserves to know what his father took, and what his father became." Jed looked down at the infant's tiny fingers curling around his own. "You think I can be something better?" "I don't know," she said. "But you can start by feeding him. He's been hungry since sunup." She reached into her saddlebag, pulled out a small bottle wrapped in cloth, and handed it to him. His hands shook as he fed the boy, watching the little chest rise and fall. "You don't hate me," he said quietly, almost disbelieving. "I did," she answered. "Every hour, every prayer, every mile. But hate only burns the one holding it. I got tired of being ash." Jed looked at her then, really looked. "What do you want from me?" Anna met his eyes, steady as the horizon. "Not your guilt," she said. "Just your help keeping him alive." The baby finished feeding and sighed, the sound small but whole. Jed lifted his gaze to the endless sky, and for the first time in years, he didn't pray for forgiveness. He prayed for time enough to earn it. By late afternoon, the desert sky began to change. Clouds rolled in low and dark, curling like smoke over the ridge, the air thick with the scent of rain that hadn't yet dared to fall. Jed built a small fire beside the wagon remains where he'd been camping, laying scraps of sagebrush into the pit while Anna sat nearby, rocking the baby in her arms. The silence between them wasn't uneasy anymore. It was the kind born of two people who'd already said everything that mattered. When the first drop hit the sand, it sizzled. "Rain," Jed muttered, looking up. "Haven't seen it in months." Anna smiled faintly. "Maybe it's time." The wind came next, sweeping the horizon into a blur of gold and gray. Jed stood, pulling the tarp over their supplies, then glanced at her. "We'll ride for the bluff, there's cover there." She adjusted the blanket around the child. "He's sleeping." "Then let him sleep in my arms. You ride." She looked at him long and hard, then nodded. When she handed over the baby, their fingers brushed, rough, calloused hands meeting soft, worn skin, and for a heartbeat, the air held still. The storm broke before they reached the ridge. Rain slammed down like judgment, the kind that soaked through bone and memory alike. Jed shielded the infant with his coat, guiding the horse through the mud while Anna clung behind him, her arms tight around his waist. The lightning cracked so close the air burned white, but Jed kept riding, his jaw set, his grip sure. When they finally reached a shallow cave carved into the rock face, he slid off, helping Anna dismount before ducking them both inside. Water ran down the stone like tears that wouldn't stop. The baby whimpered, then quieted when Jed held him close to his chest. "He ain't afraid," Jed said softly. "He's tougher than me already." Anna's voice was tired but gentle. "He don't know fear yet. You'll teach him different." Jed looked at her, rain dripping from his hair, the firelight catching his eyes. "You trust me to? I came this far, didn't I?" The thunder rolled again, but softer now, the storm starting to drift east. Jed reached into his pack, pulled out his last piece of jerky, and tore it in half, handing her one piece. She took it wordlessly. "You still plan on hanging yourself out here?" she asked after a long pause. "I planned on facing the law." "And now?" He looked down at the child, asleep against him. "Now I figure the law's already sitting in my arms." She met his gaze, the firelight reflecting between them like something alive. "Then maybe justice found you first." The storm outside eased to a whisper, leaving only the sound of a baby breathing and two lost souls learning how to begin again. The storm drifted east by dusk, leaving the desert rinsed clean and smelling of dust and lightning. Jed built a small fire just outside the cave, its smoke rising in lazy threads toward the stars. Anna sat close, the baby wrapped in a dry blanket, his tiny breaths the only rhythm strong enough to steady them both. Jed handed her his coat, though she shook her head. "You'll freeze," she said. "I've been colder," he answered with that half-smile that never quite reached his eyes. Silence settled again, the kind that came after confessions. The baby stirred, and Anna looked down at him with a softness that made Jed ache. "You said you buried your gun," she murmured. "Why?" "Because it's killed enough men worth more than me." "Then why wait here for the law?" He stared into the flames. "Because I can't fix what I did, but I can quit running from it." Anna nodded slowly. "Maybe stopping the running is what fixin' looks like." She shifted, holding the child closer. "You think God forgives a man who kills?" Jed's answer came rough and low. "If he don't, then he ain't the kind they preach about." For a while, they just listened, the fire crackling, the wind whispering against the stone. Then Anna reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a small loaf wrapped in cloth. "Was saving this," she said, breaking it in half and offering him a piece. "Ain't much." Jed hesitated before taking it, chewing slow. The taste was simple, dry, honest. "You ever think about going back east?" he asked. "To what?" she said. "Gravestones and gossip? Out here at least the truth don't echo." He nodded. "You could stay with the Carters past the ridge. They run stock. Take in travelers. Wouldn't ask questions." "And you?" she asked. He looked down at the sleeping baby in her arms. "I stay till you don't need me." "That ain't the same as leavin'," she said quietly. He met her eyes. "Maybe I don't deserve leavin'." The baby shifted then, one tiny fist breaking free from the blanket. Jed reached out and touched the small hand with the same care he once used to load a bullet. Anna watched, her voice barely more than breath. "He looks like you." Jed swallowed. "Then I hope he learns better." The stars brightened above them, hard and clear. Anna leaned back against the cave wall, eyes heavy, the firelight soft on her face. "You keep saying you're waiting for justice," she murmured. "Maybe it's already here." Jed looked at her, at the child, at the quiet that felt more like grace than punishment. "Maybe it is," he said. And for the first time in years, he stopped listening for footsteps on the wind. When Jed woke, the desert was still wet from the night before, puddles catching the first pink of sunrise. The fire had died down to ash, and Anna sat at the cave's mouth with the baby resting against her shoulder, humming a tune so faint it barely reached him. It wasn't joy, but it wasn't grief either. Something in between, like peace that hadn't quite learned to trust itself. He rose quietly, stretching the stiffness from his limbs, and stepped outside. The horizon glowed gold over the ridges, and for the first time, he thought it looked less like judgment and more like invitation. Anna turned when she heard him. "You didn't sleep much," she said. "Didn't want to. Because of me?" "Because I didn't think I'd wake up to peace." She gave a small smile. "Maybe the desert's starting to forgive you." He sat beside her, picking up a stone and rolling it in his hand. "You really mean to ride on with me?" She adjusted the blanket around the baby. "You thought I came all this way just to drop him and leave?" "I figured I'd earned that." "Maybe," she said, "but I ain't letting him grow up thinking his father died before he ever tried living right." Jed stared at the child, his child, and said, "You don't owe me that." Ain't about owing, she said. It's about truth. For a long while, they just sat in the pale morning, watching the desert steam where the rain had hit. The smell of wet earth filled the air. Jed broke the silence first. There's a town south, Red Hollow. They got a marshal there who still remembers me. You planning to turn yourself in? Promised I would. And if they hang you? He looked out toward the horizon. Then you'll tell him his father didn't run twice. She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but softer than he'd ever heard it. I'll tell him his father stopped running and started standing. Jed nodded, as if that made sense in a way words couldn't. They packed what little they had, leaving the cave cleaner than they'd found it. Before mounting the horse, Jed took one last look back at the fire pit. Strange thing, he said, how ashes still smell like home. Anna met his eyes. That's 'cause something good burned there. He held her gaze a moment longer, then swung into the saddle and reached down for her. She climbed up behind him, holding the baby tight, her cheek resting against his back. Together they rode south into the warming light, two sinners carrying something far heavier than guilt. Hope. Small but real, born from the kind of mercy no law could measure. They reached Red Hollow by dusk, the sun bleeding into the horizon behind them. The town hadn't changed much. Same crooked saloon sign, same church steeple leaning like it carried too many secrets. Jed slowed his horse as they rode down the main street, heads turning one by one. Every man there knew who he was, or thought they did. A drunk near the trough squinted and muttered, "That's Coulter, the outlaw who shot Avery." Jed kept riding. Anna sat behind him, holding the baby close, her chin high despite the whispers. When they reached the sheriff's office, Jed swung down and tied the reins. "Stay here," he said quietly. She looked up at him. "You think I came this far to watch from the street? Ain't much to see but shame. Then we'll share it." She stepped down before he could argue, shifting the baby in her arms. The door creaked open, and Sheriff Boone looked up from behind his desk. He was older now, heavier, his gray beard hiding the scar Jed remembered giving him years ago in a saloon brawl gone bad. His eyes widened. "Well, I'll be damned." Jed removed his hat. "You might. You here to turn yourself in? Been waiting 3 days out in the desert for you." Boone leaned back in his chair, studying the woman and child. "You brought company." "Didn't plan to." Anna stepped forward. "He came to face you, Sheriff. But what he's facing ain't just law, it's what's right." Boone frowned. "You Avery's widow?" "I was," she said simply. "Now I'm just a mother looking for peace." Boone's gaze softened, confusion creasing the hard lines of his face. "You mean to say you forgave him?" "Forgiven don't change what he did," she said. "But it changes what comes next." Boone rose slowly, the chair groaning behind him. "Law says he hangs." "Law says a lot," she replied, "but mercy's older." Jed's voice was steady when he spoke. "I ain't asking for pardon. Just want my boy to know I didn't run from truth." Boone stared at him a long time, then sighed. "You're a damn fool, Coulter, but I've seen worse men walk free." He walked to the cell door and unlocked it. "You can rest here tonight. I'll telegraph the circuit judge come morning. He'll decide if your soul's worth saving." Jed nodded. Anna's hand brushed his arm. "You're not alone in this." "Never was," he said. The sheriff watched as she handed him the baby through the bars. The infant's small fingers caught Jed's shirt, holding on tight. "That boy's grip," Boone muttered. "Might just hold back hell itself." Jed smiled faintly. Then maybe there's still hope for me. Outside, the bell from the chapel rang once, clear and low, echoing through the desert dusk, a sound that felt less like judgment and more like the start of something brave. The cell was small, but for the first time in years, Jed Coulter felt no urge to leave it. The iron bars were just lines between two kinds of peace, one he'd earned and one he hadn't yet. The baby slept in a basket by the cot, wrapped in Anna's shawl. She sat on the floor beside him, her back against the wall, eyes half closed from exhaustion. Outside, Red Hollow was quiet, the saloon lamps dimming one by one, the whole town holding its breath. Jed watched the moonlight crawl across the floor until it touched her boot. "You should have stayed at the boarding house," he murmured. "I told you I don't run." "Didn't think you'd keep that promise this long?" She gave a tired smile. "You're starting to learn I mean what I say." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "If the judge don't see it your way, you'll ride out at dawn. You'll take the boy." "He's our boy," she corrected, "and I'll ride when I damn well please." He couldn't help but smile at that. Small, pained, but real. "You got iron in you." "Takes iron to forgive a killer," she said softly. The words hung in the dark, not accusation, but truth. Jed stared at the child, the slow rise and fall of his chest. "I used to think dying would set things right. Now I reckon living might be harder." Anna folded her hands, studying him. "Maybe that's why mercy ain't cheap." They sat in silence a while, the only sound the faint hiss of wind through the cracks. Then, from somewhere outside, came the low thud of boots, voices, the sheriff's, another man's. The judge had arrived early. Jed stood as Boone appeared at the doorway with a lantern, its light spilling over the floor like spilled gold. "He'll see you now," the sheriff said quietly. Anna rose, the baby still sleeping. "Now? It's near midnight." "He's riding through to Carson at first light," Boone said. "Wants it settled." Jed nodded, the calm in him surprising even himself. "Then let's finish what I started." He stepped out of the cell, the chains at his wrists clinking softly. Light, almost unnecessary. Boone hesitated. "You sure about this?" "Only thing I've ever been sure of." In the office, Judge Rollins sat by the stove, gray-haired and stern, his eyes sharper than the badge pinned to his chest. "Jed Coulter," he said, "you've been wanted in 3 counties for 10 years. Why turn yourself in now?" Jed glanced at Anna, who stood behind him, the baby against her heart. "Because I killed a man who deserved to live, and I've been dead ever since." The judge leaned back. "And what do you expect me to do with that?" Jed's voice didn't tremble. "Whatever lets my boy grow up knowing I didn't hide from what I done." The room went quiet, except for the sound of the child's breathing. For the first time, even the law didn't seem so sure of itself. Judge Rollins didn't speak for a long while. The lantern hissed softly, the wick burning low, shadows stretching long across the sheriff's office. Jed stood tall, wrists bound, the faint tremor of fatigue in his arms. Anna swayed gently with the baby, her eyes steady on the judge's face. Finally, Rollins exhaled. "You're an outlaw, Coulter. Law says I hand you to Carson for trial and rope." Jed nodded once. "Law's right. And yet you came walking in here on your own 2 feet, carrying a child that ain't got your name but carries your blood." The judge's voice softened. "That's a curious kind of criminal." Jed said nothing. Anna stepped forward. "He's done running. Ain't that what justice wants?" Rollins studied her. Then Jed. "You're the widow?" "Was," she said. "Now I'm the one who buried hate." The judge rubbed a hand over his chin. Eyes flicking between them. "You forgave him?" "I did. she said simply. "But he ain't forgiven himself." Jed's throat worked. "Ain't my place too?" "Then whose is it?" the judge asked quietly. Jed looked down at the baby, whose hand had slipped free from the blanket, fingers curling toward the light. "His," Jed said. The judge stared for a long moment, then pushed himself up from the chair. "Law don't bend easy, son, but I reckon mercy ain't a crime yet." He turned to Sheriff Boone. "You saw him turn himself in?" "I did." "He fight it?" "No, sir, came peaceful." Rollins nodded. "Then I'll write it as surrender without resistance. You'll serve time, Coulter, but not in rope's shadow. There's work at the Carson Stockade, 6 months hard labor. After that, you walk free." Jed blinked, stunned. "That's lenient." "It's fair," the judge said. "Ain't no gallows builds a better man." Boone grunted. "You heard him, Coulter. You'll ride out under guard tomorrow." Jed nodded slowly. Anna's breath caught, relief and sorrow colliding in her chest. 6 months, she whispered. "We'll wait." Jed turned to her, eyes wet despite his composure. "Don't promise that. You've already given me more than I deserve." She shook her head. "Don't tell me what to give." The judge cleared his throat softly, almost like a blessing. "I suggest you both rest. Dawn's comin' fast." When he left, Boone closed the door behind him, leaving them in the soft hum of the lantern's last light. Jed reached out, brushing a hand across the baby's head. "Guess justice ain't always hangin'," he murmured. Anna smiled faintly. "No," she said. "Sometimes it's learning to live long enough to do right." Outside, the eastern sky was paling, the desert wind carrying the smell of wet earth and redemption. Jed sat down on the cell cot, the weight on his shoulders finally shifting from punishment to purpose. For the first time, he didn't look at the dawn with dread, but with the quiet gratitude of a man still breathing when he shouldn't be. 6 months in the Carson Stockade passed like a lifetime, measured in dust and sweat. Jed Coulter worked the quarry every sunrise, hands blistered and raw, his body hardening beneath the desert sun. The guards called him the Quiet One, because he never cursed, never begged, and never stopped when the others fell behind. What kept him standing wasn't strength. It was the image of a woman and a child somewhere beyond the ridge, waiting under a sky that still remembered him. Letters weren't allowed, but once a month, Sheriff Boone rode through on circuit duty, dropping word from Red Hollow. Anna had found work as a seamstress for the Carters. Decent people, kind. The boy was walking now. "Stubborn like you," Boone had said with a chuckle. Jed kept that sentence folded in his mind, pulling it out on the hardest days. Nights were worse. That's when guilt came alive, whispering that forgiveness didn't erase what he'd done. But then he'd remember the widow's voice, steady, merciful, unshaken, and the guilt would quiet just long enough for sleep to find him. When release day came, he didn't expect anyone waiting. The warden handed him a paper of pardon and a Bible missing half its pages. "You're free to go, Coulter," he said. "Try not to make me regret it." Jed nodded, tipping his hat that wasn't there anymore. He walked out of the gates barefoot, boots worn to dust long ago, and breathed in the open air. Freedom didn't taste sweet. It tasted real, like sand and sun, and everything he hadn't earned but still received. He followed the wagon trail north toward Red Hollow, the same one he'd taken years ago when he was a different man. It took 2 days to reach the ridge. The valley looked smaller than he remembered, the wind softer. The Carter Ranch sat quiet under the evening light, smoke curling from the chimney. He paused at the gate, afraid to move, afraid that waiting might hurt less than seeing. Then a child's laugh cut through the air, a sound so bright it turned the world gold. The boy ran through the yard, chasing a chicken, and a woman stepped out onto the porch, wiping flour from her hands. Anna. She saw him before he spoke. Her face froze, then softened, the same way light changes when clouds pass. She didn't run, didn't cry, just smiled, small and steady, like sunrise after too long a night. "You kept your word," she called. Jed's throat tightened. "And you kept hope." The boy turned, squinting toward the stranger at the gate. "Mama, who's that?" She looked at Jed and said, "That's someone who came home slow but right." He didn't cross the yard yet. He just stood there, hatless, barefoot and free, watching the two souls who'd turned his punishment into purpose, and realizing that justice hadn't taken him from them. It had led him back. Evening settled soft over Red Hollow, the desert sky blushing into rose and amber as the last light caught the wheat fields swaying near the Carter Ranch. Jed stood at the gate a long while before he stepped through it, as if afraid that crossing would wake him from a mercy he didn't deserve. The boy ran halfway to him before stopping, uncertain, clutching a wooden horse in one hand. Jed knelt, his voice rough but gentle. "You must be Elias." The child nodded. "Mama says you ride fast." Jed smiled faintly. "Used to. Now I just try not to fall." The boy grinned and ran back toward the porch, shouting, "He's funny, Mama!" Anna laughed, wiping her hands on her apron as she came down the steps. The sound loosened something in Jed's chest that no confession or judge ever had. "You look better without shackles," she said. "You look better with peace," he answered. She stopped in front of him, close enough for him to smell the faint scent of bread and dust on her dress. "You mean to stay this time?" she asked. He looked toward the horizon, the same stretch of land that once felt endless and empty. "If you'll have me." "You were never mine to take," she said. "But maybe you're finally yours." She gestured toward the barn. "You can sleep there. It's not much." "It's enough," he said. "Always was." That night, after supper, they sat on the porch together. Elias played with a stray pup by the steps, while crickets sang in the distance. Anna poured coffee, her hand brushing his as she passed the cup. "You still think justice was found in that cell?" she asked. He thought for a moment, watching the stars spill out over the darkening sky. "No," he said softly. "Justice is this: working the land, watching him grow, waking up knowing I don't owe death another sunrise." She smiled, tired and warm. "Then maybe the desert did its job after all." He nodded. "Burned what needed burnin'." The pup yipped, and Elias laughed, a sound clear as church bells. Anna glanced at the boy, her voice quieter now. "He knows you're his father?" "He will," Jed said, "but I'll learn it slow." "That's the only way that lasts," she replied. The lantern flickered low between them, and Jed took a long breath, the kind that filled his chest instead of weighing it down. "Funny thing," he said. "I came here waiting to die. Turns out I was waiting to start living." Anna looked at him, eyes soft under the glow. "Then don't stop." The wind rose, carrying the scent of rain from far-off hills. Jed leaned back, tipping his hat against the chair. The night wrapped around them, quiet, wide, forgiven. And as the boy's laughter echoed through the yard, the outlaw who had once waited for justice finally understood what it meant to receive grace. Not freedom from punishment, but a second chance to do right until the very last light left the sky.